Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican about interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico. I am Inez Russell Gomez, and this week we are talking to Clarie Miller, who is a suicide counselor at the New Mexico Department of Health. September is Suicide Awareness Month, and I believe in October we will have a World Suicide Day. Uh, and it's a time for us to think about how we can help our friends, family, neighbors, uh, perhaps stay in this world a little longer. Clarie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Inez. This is an important conversation, and it can be a difficult one. I also want to acknowledge before we get started that this is a heavy topic. I want to remind the audience to take care, know that support is just three numbers away at 988. I'm also a suicide loss survivor. My husband died by suicide in
Oh,
2008. Prior to that and since then, I've lost other relatives and friends, but I have been an advocate for suicide prevention awareness and mental health support globally. I have deep roots in New Mexico, and it is a privilege to serve New Mexicans because while we are fifth in the country for overall suicides, and we're second for adolescent suicides, we have a lot of work to do.
that's always been one of the, just problems that has challenged us over and over again is the trauma that our young people feel and the depression, and then it leads into adults feeling it, and we lose too many people by self-inflicted gestures. And for such a beautiful, wonderful state, I don't know why we're so sad so many times.
Well, we know there's not one cause for suicide, right? So there's never going to be one solution, but we can look at risk factors, increase our protective factors, and really lean into our communities. I believe that New Mexico needs a multi generational crisis response in every community, and that we're looking at this as the whole community, not just specific individuals. I mean, there's such myths around suicide, and it can be so taboo to talk about still in many of our New Mexico communities. So we need to normalize talking about mental health and suicide prevention. And we also need to know that not everyone that's struggling with their mental health is suicidal, right? When I was traveling around meeting with our youth in New Mexico, that's the one thing they said. So certainly we want to be involved and prevent any crisis in the moment, but there is so much we can do in our communities, and that doesn't even cost dollars. I mean, kindness,
That's
right?
true. I
No
mean,
judgment.
yes, yes, and if you're a teacher at a school, just stopping kids from picking on somebody, not even going to having to counsel them or anything like that, but just saying, "This isn't what we do?"
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
There's a little girl in, Santa Fe, I don't remember her name, but she started a program at her school called the Buddy Bench,
I
where if
love
you
it.
want yeah, you wanna talk to somebody, you go
Yeah.
sit there and then someone comes to be your buddy, and just creating connections so people don't feel so isolated, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, suicide is a public health crisis. We know that through the public health approach, that's upstream prevention saves lives. Some upstream resources include problem solving, food, housing insecurity, right? And access to mental health care. So in New Mexico, we need to not only focus on upstream services through public health, but we also must have active, accessible crisis response and support in every community. This
Yeah.
has its challenges. New Mexico is culturally diverse, right? With many rural areas.
Yeah, that's true, and the response that you're gonna do maybe in Clovis won't be the same one you need in Dulce or Mora.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Not the same things work in each place. But I have learned that I joined the Department of Health in 2022 as the lead youth suicide prevention coordinator.
okay.
And I've known that as I've traveled around and met our communities and our youth, they're smart. These conversations are not as difficult as we think. And by recognizing traditions and cultures and leaning into those, when we visit our tribe or pueblo communities, um, I ask, what are your, beliefs around talking about suicide? And then we do what we need to do. Maybe it's a blessing in the beginning and in the end, but even in our indigenous communities, it's not the same in each community, right? So
No,
we
because
really
in
have to
Navajo
be.
special, because
Yeah,
if you're on the Navajo reservation, they don't like to talk about death, many of the traditional cultural Navajos at all, much
right.
less suicide. So, yeah, you're right.
And that's changed. It
Yes.
really has started to change across the state, and we saw some significant declines from 2022 to 2023, and that was really when we started leaning into those communities and supporting them where they are. And so we saw an over 40% drop in the American Indian and Alaskan Native suicide rate in New Mexico.
Well, that's huge because wasn't that the leading group for a long time?
It was, and it was a big decrease. I do wanna say, though, that we have our 2024 numbers, and they are increased from 2023 pretty much back to where we were averaging before.
Okay. So it was just whatever reason there was a blip that we don't know the reason at this point. Um, what does your office do in terms of suicide prevention and help for people?
So we support nonprofits across the state, really incredible organizations that are in the community. They're the boots on the ground. They're getting the messaging out. We also support and promote 988. In 2022 is when 988 had rolled out, and I was at a United Soccer game in Albuquerque, and they had 988 up on the board, and we were giving away fidgets, and this these kiddos were coming up, a brother and a sister, and they were getting the fidgets and walking around, but they would turn their hat around, right? So I wouldn't recognize them or do different things to disguise themselves. Well, their mom came up and said, "Do you know why she's here?" And the 9-year-old boy said, "Well, if there's something on my mind that I can't talk to you or dad or sister about, there is a number that I could call." Now, imagine being 9 years old and not only having your mental health validated, but having a resource that's accessible to you. And I think that was a huge impact across our states, not only in the indigenous communities, but we also had a lot more Wi-Fi access after COVID in those communities too. So again, so many things can impact that. 988 is a great resource that we love to promote throughout the state. And we
Uh-huh.
also promote gatekeeper trainings, which are suicide prevention trainings.
Okay.
We support suicide prevention in the schools. And one of the most effective things I've seen across New Mexico is when we have student led suicide prevention task forces, when they are empowered to be able to help each other because they're talking to each other,
Right.
right? We know that. So let's empower them and not be afraid of talking to them, because not only do they want to help each other, they're completely capable of it. So we need to give them the tools. And again, like you said, what we do in Dulce doesn't work in Las Cruces, right? So we really
Right.
have to modify the work that's done.
Yeah, that's so important, and I think that, we kinda shortchange young people sometimes and not letting them lead the way and tell us what they need because they know what will help them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's and one of the problems I have read is that we are short, behavioral health counselors, psychiatrists. There's not necessarily always counselors in the schools, and if they are, they're so busy. How do you support people when there's not enough bodies around to do the support?
So here's some way that we can start to change the voice around suicide prevention. I acknowledge 100% we are underserved in New Mexico. We are underserved across the country. Some entire communities don't have access to healthcare or mental support without driving 2 to 3 miles. However, we do have more resources than we've ever had. And just about every region, we have youth, adult, geriatric support. So we've really expanded. And we do hear, I can't get in for a month, or there's nobody I can see. There are so many options now. And I'm telling you, no matter where you are in New Mexico, it may not be a live person, but if you are in crisis, there are resources available for you. So, yes, we're underserved, but we also have many resources. And honestly, New Mexico has one of the top resources in the country when it comes to rural areas and being able to access. So, we do have a lot of good too. And I want people to know there are resources if they want to reach out. Now, each of us are individuals, right? And if
Yes.
we even brought maybe one behavioral health counselor in here for the four of us, it may not work for all four of us. So we need to support people and ourselves and be able to advocate for the right type of care.
No, that's right. Because some people want to do talk therapy, other people
Yep.
need to have a different way of approaching it, and other people need medications. And what works for one person is not going to work for the other. So that's
Right.
so wise. Um, we've talked a lot about young people, but the problem of suicide obviously doesn't go away as we
Right.
age.
No.
So, how do we help people connect in society so perhaps they don't feel so lonely and so down?
We know that burdensomeness and thwarted belongingness can have an impact on suicidality. So again, people that are isolated, making sure that we're reaching out to them. We also know when it comes to suicide and much of mental health crisis that people will not reach out. We need to lean into where they are. We need to recognize the signs and the symptoms, and they can look different in adolescence as they do in late life. For several years, late life male suicide was our top at risk category. That changed a little bit in 2024 to 25 to 34 years old. But still, when we look at 988 calls and when we do fatality reviews, we have everything from a 9-year old to a 94-year-old and
Wow,
and
that's
everything. So there's never a time in one's lifespan where suicide isn't an option. We need to acknowledge that and be able to talk about it.
oh, that's a really good point. And on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more conversations different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking to Clarie Miller about efforts in New Mexico to reduce the incidence of suicide. I want to talk about how people go about it because it seems to me that when we are deeply depressed and want to leave this world, if it's harder to do that, maybe people will change their minds. And that can be everything from the Taos Gorge Bridge not having the higher railings and the things that can prevent suicide to not having your guns locked up at your house.
Mhm. I
There's
mean, reducing access to lethal means is a critical component of suicide prevention. And quite often, the ultimate suicide crisis is not more than 2 to 7 minutes. It's not a long time, but being able to restrict access is important. We know that if someone is having a mental health crisis, there's substance use involved, and then a firearm. By removing one of those elements, you can reduce the likelihood of suicide by 70%. There's
wow.
also another myth out there that I've heard repeatedly is that, well, if someone doesn't have access to a gun, they're just going to go do it another way. It's actually a very callous way to look at it and how to speak about it. And it's also not true. Most people will stay with their chosen means. Therefore, by reducing access, we have that opportunity, we have that moment to help them. And it
That's
can be anything from car keys, sharp objects, um, firearms, absolutely, automobiles. So really being in the space where you know, hey, I know I can help this person the most by reducing access to lethal means and
Yep.
making that happen.
No, that's right. I know it. I've written a lot of editorials. That's my day job as the opinion page editor about suicides at the bridge in Taos.
Yes.
And people say, well, they'll just do it another way or they'll just try it again. And the research, I guess, in San Francisco, because of their similar bridge, is that the people who survive the fall are so happy to be alive, they don't try it again. That it's almost like this wave and then it passes and then they're able to go on with their lives. So if we can help stop them from jumping off, we
Mhm.
save them perhaps.
I do want to touch on the Taos Bridge, but I also want to say there's an incredible human being. His name is Kevin Hines, and he is one of the few people to jump from the Golden Gate Bridge and survive.
Oh, wow.
And so he talks about when he set out that day, if one person was nice to him, held open a door, waved, he wasn't going to do it. And let's
Oh,
admit that's way too much pressure to put on the world, right? But it
right,
also shows us how important kindness is. He also shares that as soon as his foot and hand left the bridge, it was instant regret. He would have given
oh,
anything to go back, and not have done that. However, when he landed in the water, you can imagine he broke almost every bone in his body, and
oh,
dolphins and sea lions physically held him up above water so that he could breathe and so that he wouldn't drown. He
oh,
also shares that he did have suicidality on occasion after that, but he had the resources and he had the tools and he had the means to be able to work through those safely. So, I mean, his story is just so impactful, and he's on YouTube and does
right,
talks, but it really gives us a lot of insight into this. Isn't just a magic flip that switched and I want to and then I don't. This
right,
is about the world that we live in and how we function on a daily basis, right?
right.
Um, there has been a lot of uh, needed improvements at the bridge. There have been a lot of suggestions here at our Taos Gorge Bridge. What they did in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Bridge is they put what they called was a net
Right,
underneath
right.
it, but it's metal. There's nothing soft about this thing. It's chain link metal. That
Ouch.
would be way too heavy for the Gorge Bridge with the research that's been done. Now, American Foundation of Suicide Prevention tells us that the best evidence-based practices at bridges are barriers.
Yep, yep.
The call boxes do serve as a barrier, but it may not be the barrier that we need up there. And so there's many challenges around that. I can say that at least for the last 4 or 5 months, all call boxes up there are operational,
Oh,
and they
that's
are
good.
being tested on a weekly basis. So yeah, and now
Yeah.
we have geolocating, which is gonna make a difference at bridges everywhere.
Mhm.
T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon. Now, if you're on your cell phone and you're at the bridge and you call 988, they know where you are. And that is just recent. We couldn't always access the geolocating. So we can do a lot more promotion of 988 around areas of high risk and, really make sure that we're doing everything to keep it as safe as we can. And we need to do more at that
Right.
bridge.
No, that's so important, and I think always about the rescue, men and women who are
Oh,
going down, half a dozen times a year and carrying up really, uh, broken humans, and it's just they're having PTSD and they
mhm,
don't need that, and people need to hopefully be kept safe in their moment of despair, and
right.
I think higher guardrails there, would make a huge difference, and there's, I guess, a worry that it's not so pretty and it won't be a tourist attraction at that point, but
Well,
that's a
when I heard that, because I've received that too, um, they have completely made the Empire State Building safe, and there are no obstruction of views. This can be done.
it just needs the will, and that's I don't know why it has been such a struggle because even getting the call boxes, as I recall, was not an easy,
Yeah.
lift, so that's good. I think what you're saying is, reducing access is something that we can do apart from support like mental health support, those
Mhm.
kinds of things, that's just another step in this complex problem.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what is happening in New Mexico during September?
So much is going on throughout the state, and I encourage everybody to reach out to their local communities. American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does have a walk in Las Cruces and in Albuquerque. And then we have events going on with NAMI, which is National Alliance of Mental Illness in New Mexico. They have a northern and a southern chapter. They both have activities going on. Facebook is a great resource, and Department of Health is starting to combine events that are happening throughout the state. As we've talked, we're very diverse, right? That's no easy task. So that's going to be a great resource to be able to see where events are. But even just local 311 or, reaching out to news stations or online. There are a lot of wonderful events. And, a lot of the events that happen during September are to support suicide loss survivors. And they are incredibly powerful events. And many schools hold mental health day or suicide prevention day. They really lean in. I was at a school last year for their mental health day, and they had a horse that came to visit. And we know animal therapy and equine therapy is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves, right? Plus, it's like makes us smile. Um, so nothing's out of the box, right? Some communities are going to have horses, some are going to have walks, some are going to show movies or documentaries to the community to better educate. Many will be holding gatekeeper suicide prevention trainings in person and virtual across the state.
Okay. And that is important information. And we'll put your website and everything on our show
Thank you.
notes so people can look at it there. And we'll be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking about Suicide Prevention Month with Clarie Miller of the New Mexico Department of Health. Um, in your work, I'm sure you see people who are in family settings and maybe are talking about how they help their relative who might be struggling. What can you tell us that we can do in our lives with people we love if we notice something's not quite right and we want to help and not make it worse?
So, a couple of things: stay calm, be present with them. We don't need to shout or yell or stand up, right? And the most important thing is when someone says that they are thinking of dying by suicide, that we believe them. And if they say it 100 times, we believe them every single time. It's one of the biggest questions I get, what's the biggest sign? It's when they tell you. So listen and be there to support them and make this an engagement. It's not an inquisition. It's not, trying to get at the information. The point is to listen to them. Use active listening skills. Be present. Don't be distracted. Put your phone away and ask them, what do you need? Or what has helped you in the past? You may be able to make a great connection and provide someone with the support that they need. It's also when we're going to know who doesn't have the help and support too, right? Or we'll
Yeah.
have to lean in a little more. So the hardest part of suicide prevention is that we have to talk to each other and listen to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true, and you have to actually be interested in what they're saying,
Yes.
because sometimes they're having a crisis in the middle of your favorite television show, and you're tired because 'cause you've worked all day, and not that you're a rat, it's just that you're exhausted, and
Right. And
that's the moment they need you.
yes, and let's give each other grace here. Not everybody can handle a suicide prevention crisis in the moment. It is okay to call in someone else. It is
Yeah.
okay to find someone that will be able to ask them the difficult questions. However, if someone is in crisis, we don't ever want to leave them alone.
Yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense. And I think what you said about listen to them and believe them is so important, because I know there's a tendency if someone says, "I'm gonna kill myself," too many times, you start to tune them out because you're like, "Oh, yeah, that's what you always say, you never do it," which you don't wanna tell them, "Go do it then and quit talking about it," because that's obviously the wrong response. But I do think that in dealing those personal relationships, most of us are not trained. We're
Right.
likely to say the wrong thing.
So let me tell you the easiest thing to say. I want you to live. I believe in you, and I'm going to help you get through this.
Yeah. Oh, that's it's so supportive and positive, and it's
Mhm.
I think in those crisis situations, we often act out of fear, which
Yes.
again leads us to say the wrong thing. So hearing what you're saying really helps you that there's another approach to it. I want you
Mhm.
to live. I like having you in my life. That's important.
Yes. I mean, the things that feel good to hear,
Mhm.
that's what we wanna say, right? And
Yes.
language is very important when it comes to suicide prevention, and it's been so confusing over decades, centuries even, because we've been scared of how to talk about it. We've heard the term committed suicide,
Yeah.
and we know that anybody that's lost someone to suicide knows that that is not a criminal act. Um, we hear killed themselves. Well, the most
Hello?
appropriate way to speak of this is to say that someone died by suicide. So
Okay.
my mother died by cancer, my husband died by suicide. There's no stigma there, but we've been so confused about how to talk about it. The best way is honest, straightforward conversations. Another important element when we're helping someone through a suicide crisis is that quite often it's easier for people to say, "Are you thinking of hurting yourself?" Well, in fact, people in a suicidal crisis may not see that as a hurtful act to
Right.
themselves or to others. So you may not get the information that you need. Honest, straightforward, direct language. Are you thinking of killing yourself?
Okay, just go
And
there.
they're
Yeah, because
just a
if
few words, but it's not
yeah.
easy to say the first
No,
time
it
you
is.
say it. So it's okay to say it out loud before you're in a crisis.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because if you're in pain, killing yourself is not hurting yourself.
Right,
It's getting rid of the pain,
right,
you know? And I think for people who aren't in that mode where they want to do away with themselves, I don't know that we can understand just how deep the blackness can be and
right.
how bad they're hurting.
And I don't think we have to,
Yeah,
right? I don't think we have to.
that makes sense. You just have to understand that it's serious and it could lead to permanent consequences.
Right, and
And that
just as if someone was having a heart attack and you decided, "This is not my day, I just can't deal with this," and walked away,
Mhm.
that's the same thing.
Yeah. But if they were having a heart attack, you'd feel perfectly comfortable calling the ambulance to treat them, and
Right.
it's,
Instead, we
yeah,
call 988
right,
instead of 911,
yeah,
and it's
and I
perfectly fine to call for someone else.
it is, that makes sense, and I think one of the situations, if you have a family member with mental health issues that maybe lead them to act out in a way that could cause, like, say, a police officer to misunderstand what's happening,
Mhm.
sometimes it's very scary to reach out for help because 'cause you're afraid you're gonna be hurt.
And I wanna bring that up too. Not everywhere where 988 is available do we have crisis response.
Right.
Sometimes it will be law enforcement if it's needed, but the best thing that we can do on that call is say, "This is a mental health crisis."
Yes.
And make that very, very clear in the call. Law enforcement is the first to tell you we're not trained in this at the capacity that we need to be. And so, by recognizing that and just really letting them know this is mental health, they will be able to send the best person for that response, whether they have one specifically or not.
Okay. That's important. And I think, cities like Santa Fe that are having alternative response units
Yes.
and having more treatment on the streets to catch people, when they're in crisis should hopefully lead to better outcomes, whether it's just a violent outburst or someone who's going to inflict self-harm upon themselves.
Right.
So, yeah, that's good. Um, what advice do you give families when they start noticing, let's say they have a child that's becoming, different and kind of a darker aura around them, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
How do they intervene maybe before it gets so far that they might, kill themselves?
The biggest thing is to talk to them and to listen to them without judgment, without shame, without any um, negativity around it, right? And really find out where they're coming from. Are there resources that they know about at the same time, or even, hey, maybe let's do this beforehand? Parents, start looking at the resources in your communities, start looking at the resources recommended by an MDOH and by our school districts, and have those ready. One of the biggest things we can do is New Mexico Crisis and Access Line has an app. Every New Mexican can put that on their phone. And that can provide immediate support and resources to prepare someone who may be in that situation. And one of the hardest things for me over the last few years was meeting with the parents that had lost a child to suicide and having them just tell me over and over, we didn't know we had to talk about this. We didn't know we had to talk about this. And of course, this isn't something that has been generational, right? This is new. Our youth have used their voices loudly to demand validation for their mental health, and we need to be here for it. But at the same time, the older generation is learning and trying to catch up. So this is a very unique time when it comes to mental health.
That's right. So we're recognizing that people have issues and need help, and we're not always able to provide the right support in time to prevent the crisis.
Mhm.
That's
There was a family that I met a couple of years ago. They weren't in New Mexico, um, but the son, he was in seventh grade. The year before, he'd been in sixth grade, obviously, and riding the bus to school, he had bullies. And he ended up telling his parents about the bullies. One of the bullies became his best friend. So they started their seventh grade year, and he was getting bullied again in class. And he told his very small friend group that he was thinking of killing himself.
oh,
His friend that used to be the bully went immediately to the teacher, and they talked to the boy, and he said, "No, no, no, I was just joking around." Well, they kept going. They didn't stop there. They didn't just say, "Okay, you were kidding. I get it." The parents were called in. When I spoke to the mom, it was about 2 hours that they were engaged with their son, and she said it was the most difficult conversation
oh,
she had ever had, but they were not going to stop talking until everybody was satisfied that the truth was known. So, eventually, he said, "Yeah, I was gonna get a gun at school tomorrow and come home because I was
oh,
tired of being bullied." They got him into a residential center the next day. They didn't stay, he was with them the whole
right.
night, and they did the right things. And I mean, he's flourishing. He understands better how to regulate his emotions, which is a huge protective factor.
Yeah,
Emotion regulation and problem solving, right? So there are resources that help. People can get through a suicidal crisis, and it's incredibly challenging for both parents and their kiddos, but we can do hard things, right?
yeah. And if we don't do hard things, then we're a lot worse off,
Yeah.
honestly, because sometimes you just have to confront it straight on.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I appreciate your time, and I know this is a hard topic, and I hope that everyone takes advantage of the different programs and activities for this month so we're all more aware of what's happening. And this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.